According to police reports that saw the substance in the Fnaf books, it's appeared to be a bubbling liquid mercury. The appearance of this glowing silvery liquid is similar to Remnant depicted in the novel trilogy, particularly in the fourth closet, which makes sense given that Remnant, as we know, is a combination of human soul and metal, which is created when a soul possesses a metal-based object like an animatronic endoskeleton. In the Fazbear Frights books, where most of this lore comes from, its powers are expanded upon. Remnant can be used to make already living beings even more powerful through the power of positive memories, kind of like how everyone gets defeated by the power of love in The Flash. The primary scientist studying Remnant is Dr. Talbert, a friend of Phineas Taggart who studied its negative counterpart, Agony, which now means that the Agony that possesses animatronics and the human soul are two different things, but seemingly both of which had to come from someone who died. Talbert studied Remnant because his daughter Renelle was sick when she was younger and he wanted to hold on to the good memories of her in case he lost her. Remnant could also be isolated and put into a certain object, so Talbert created a pendant made from Remnant metal as a gift for Renelle. Keep in mind that this Remnant is also just a form of metal. It's kind of like a metal compound, like Damascus steel, but instead of a lot of layers of steel, it's metal and souls melted down, and then that is liquid Remnant, but then as a solid, I guess you could say it's a Remnant nugget. It's unclear how Dr. Talbert got his hands on such a large amount of Remnant, but he had a steady supply that somehow was consistently delivered to his house. This also got the attention of an evil entity named Eleanor, who was introduced, or I guess created in the story, to be beautiful from 1:35 a.m., the second Fazbear Frights book. Her goal was to obtain Remnant for herself to become even more powerful, so that she could spread pain and suffering across the world using the power of positive vibes. However, what we currently know about Remnant and Agony tells us that to destroy it properly, we need to burn it. Hence why there have really been so many fires in this series. FNAF 3, 6, and 9 all end with something or someone getting set on fire. FNAF 3's fire was all about dealing with Springtrap, and FNAF 6 was about putting everyone who knew about the atrocities that occurred at Freddy's to rest, and sending William to hell. And then, in FNAF 9, we burn Trap multiple times to get him to stop possessing Freddy, and to again try to kill him. Because Gregory is not above killing. That's a topic for another day. And this is because Henry learned that the only way to destroy Remnant and put these beings to rest was through fire. But is that really how we deal with these animatronics and people? Because like, while 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Crest Pro Health toothpaste, 3 out of 3 FNAF fires haven't worked. We have been told that fire is the only thing that is hot enough to burn off Remnant and to actually destroy it, aside from the fact that matter cannot be created nor destroyed, but it's also been described as a liquid metal. Liquid metal is a hell of a lot hotter than your typical run-of-the-mill gasoline fire, trust me, okay? I have the expertise in this department, so in essence, every single animatronic who is supposed to be set free by a cleansing fire hasn't been so far. The only time we've seen souls actually be put to rest is in FNAF 3's Happiest Day minigame, which involved no fire and just putting the souls to rest by giving them what they wanted, a birthday party. But how could that be possible? Like, Dr. Talbert wouldn't lie to us. He's researching so his little girl wouldn't die, right? Well, this is where this theory starts to blow your mind. I don't think that Dr. Talbert, as described in the FNAF Fazbear Frights books, is a real person. Or rather, I don't think that Dr. Talbert is truly his name. Let's think about it. Who else do we know with a daughter in a compromising position who would have an endless flow of Remnant from an undisclosed source and a close personal friend working as his opposite? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, William frickin' Afton. William Afton, my friends, is the true identity of Dr. Talbert. William is no stranger to using aliases either. Remember Dave Miller from the Silver Eyes? Exactly. And this connection only gets stronger the more you look at it. See, Talbert's daughter ends up being impersonated by Eleanor, who in the Fazbear Frights books is, like, described to be Baby. She's described as basically Baby, just with a longer neck. So both daughters in this scenario also end up becoming Baby at some point. Renelle, through being impersonated, infected, and Elizabeth when she possessed Baby through, you guessed it, Remnant. And Talbert and Eleanor are attacked by the Stitch Wraith. What does that relate to? Perhaps the son, who is part animatronic that's been working to undo his father's plans? Michael? Have we seen the animatronics in the games? No, so how can we take any of what's being said in the Fazbear Frights epilogues as fact? The baby blob turned out to be real, but everything else could simply be a metaphor. And Rennell might not even be meant to represent Elizabeth. It could be meant to represent Crying Child, making Eleanor Elizabeth and the Stitch Wraith Michael, and honestly, that sounds like a much more plausible solution than what's being described in these books, especially with the revelation that Gregory could, again, be a rebuilt Crying Child robot, because all these experiments with Remnant worked. If this was truly describing William and Crying Child and Michael and Elizabeth, this would make perfect sense with the story. This is like a recap of what's been going on with FNAF. FNAF 4, Crying Child dies. So William promises that he will put him back together by finding Remnant after he kills the 5 missing children and then disassembling them in FNAF 3's minigames when he releases the spirits and then gets trapped in the Springlock suit. But then we also learn in the original novel trilogy that the remnant from the original 5 animatronics was injected into the Funtime animatronics. So while the Funtime animatronics have the souls of the 5 missing children all combined into one, they also are serving as an experiment for how he can use it to bring back his son. And he even injects Eleanor, who was impersonating Rennell, with the remnant, just as he recreates Crying Child into Gregory. So here's how I see it. William as Talbert through, I'm guessing, just journals that Henry just somehow stumbled onto were made to spread the rumor of Remnant needing to burn, to be destroyed, so that if Henry ever tried to stop William, he wouldn't be able to. That's why William knows he'll always come back. He's rigged the game, and in doing so, ensured the survival of himself, his daughter, and his 2 sons. Rennell is a representation of Crying Child, having been bitten at his birthday party in 1983 that William is trying to save. Eleanor is the power-hungry daughter Elizabeth that only wants the remnant for herself, even willing to abandon her father to die to live another day, as we see with the Afton amalgamation, or even kill her father, as we potentially see at the end of the true FNAF Security Breach ending. And the Stitch Wraith is Michael, at first misunderstood, killing his creator like Michael tried in the FNAF 3 and 6 Fire, but in reality trying to right the wrongs of his father before him and bring peace to his family. And as we see in Security Breach, they accomplished their goals. Gregory, representing Crying Child, is back. He and Freddy, representing Michael, stopped William, and Vanny, Elizabeth, gets to fight another day. Now, I'm not some MatPat sympathizer who wants to defend him so he'll notice me or something, because this is a theory that I've had since the Funko statues were revealed. At least I think they're by Funko. At least the statues for the game, once they were revealed, I've had this theory. So I am truly looking at the theory and not blinded by my like or dislike of MatPat. I'm simply looking at what we've been presented with to see if what we've been saying here, in my eyes, is truly possible. One of the main reasons everyone seems to be so frustrated by this idea is because it's far-fetched. Is it really, though? Like, let's look at some of the elements of the series and really talk about what the series has actually gone through, okay? Kids have been stuffed into animatronic suits only to end up possessing them. Those spirits were then released when William Afton decided to disassemble the animatronics and were able to scare him into getting trapped in his own animatronic suit. William has survived 3 fires while being present in all of them for the entirety of them, as we see in Sister Location's ending, where he was in Fazbear Frights after it had already been burnt down for a while. We see in Security Breach that he was still in the FNAF 6 location after it had burned down, meaning that he was there for the whole fire, and he was literally standing in fire multiple times during the final fight in Security Breach's true ending. None of those times has he been completely killed, either. Also, none of the FNAF 6 animatronics were actually wiped out. They were just melded into one blob. A woman who was simply testing a VR game had her body taken over by a sentient virus that was able to lock her subconscious in a mobile game that was then ported to an arcade cabinet without letting her regain control of her body, and despite how many kids have gone missing, people continue to come back to the Fazbear restaurants, despite it basically being a giant casino game as to whether you're going home with your kid at this point. And that's only in the games. There are plenty of similar elements going on in the books, and while yes, the books aren't canon to the games, they share information and help explain what can and cannot be possible in this game world as Scott sees it. The sound illusion discs that plenty of people consider to be the cause for FNAF 4's animatronics first appeared in the Twisted Ones novel and hasn't had a canon appearance in the games. A disc people think could be an illusion disc can be found in Sister Location, but in that game they call it a power module. Therefore, it is not confirmed to be a sound disc. If you believe that FNAF 4's nightmare animatronics are the result of illusions created by sound emitted from discs, you cannot dismiss his theory because he used the books to prove it. Because that's literally what you're doing with the FNAF 4 sound discs, okay? They're from the books, so that's a double standard. The reveal of William Afton's name came from the Silver Eyes novel as well, which was proven to be true in the Sister Location opening scene during William Afton's interview seemingly with the police. And in the books, there is a legit kid who was turned into a series of robots so that she could grow up like a normal person despite being killed, and they're both named Charlotte or some variation of it. Charlie, for example, in the books. So, children being animatronics is not a stretch for these games, and it's already been present in some aspects of the FNAF lore. While the story and the sequence of events from the novel are not canon to the games, they both share similar characters and ideas that we can't just ignore because they're presented in another medium. Another thing I see popping up quite a lot is that a brown-haired, dark-eyed white character can really be anybody. It's been memed incredibly hard, with various people putting plenty of characters over that frame in his episode, with some people saying that he's just comparing two white kids, so of course they look the same. I want to say how this argument of he could be anyone is absolutely ridiculous, because while yes, he is comparing the characters he wants to compare and comparing seemingly meaningless things, take a look at this picture of how Crying Child is presented to us in FNAF 4. This is the only real view we have of this character. He is literally an 8-bit character that's like 64 pixels high with less detail than a picture of Sudbury in a snowstorm. So design choices like hair color and stripes on the shirt are the only way we're able to compare characters and identify Crying Child. And logically, if Scott was making Gregory a robot Crying Child, they would not have the exact same outfit. And like, how would you picture Crying Child in a 3D medium? Because Gregory's design makes a lot of sense. And if you dropped Gregory down to 8-bit like you would see in FNAF 4, they would still look awfully similar. There is also the point that Gregory's vision gets weird when approached by Vanny. And keep in mind, it's only Vanny specifically and not any other enemies. This is hard to explain if Gregory is just some random kid, because the effect we see on screen is that of an old camera when like you'd bring a magnet close to it. The reason it would only happen around Vanny is due to her being controlled by the sentient virus we see take control in FNAF VR, since she seems to be the only one able to spread it aside from Burn Trap. And notice that in normal gameplay we can't actually get near Burn Trap, so we can't know if he was meant to give us this effect. Yes, in the game we can get to him, but that's through a glitch. So if that error wasn't there in the game, we wouldn't know if he did or did not give us this effect. And since we aren't supposed to get to him, they wouldn't code it in, because why would there be a logical reason for him to have that effect if he's not going to get close to us? And the last bit of rebuttal I'm seeing as to how Gregory is not a robot Crying Child is that he's too young for it, since Crying Child died in 1983. Are you serious? Guys, it's a robot, okay? It wouldn't age. When Charlie was made into a robot, she literally had to have 4 separate versions so that she could then grow up to be an adult. This could simply be a younger version of the Crying Child robot that ran away from home, hence why he lives on the streets, and therefore could reasonably have as much life experience as he seemingly does. This kid is able to drive a van, is willing to kill Vanny in the disassemble ending, is able to use the jumper cables on a car battery to fix Freddy's power issue statue properly and is able to speak full sentences despite seemingly being small enough to fit inside Freddy, random baby strollers, and other various bits around the Pizzaplex. Keep in mind that the opening inside Freddy is very small. That's an awful lot of knowledge that a 12-year-old, if he even is supposed to be 12, wouldn't realistically have, especially if he was homeless and or living inside the Pizzaplex. It's almost as if this kid has 40 years of life experience, which would only be possible if he was in fact a robot. The whole being a robot for 40 years thing would also explain why he would no longer fear the animatronics, if he is at least meant to be a robot crying child, which could also explain why he decides to stay at the end of the game, because he has more experience and knows that no one else is gonna do anything. First, let's see what we know about the client just based on what's in the recordings and not compare it to anyone else, so we can form an objective profile of Client 46. In their first tape, we get the therapist saying, quote, "You know, everyone associated with this company gets performance reviews, right? Which means that they're associated with a company, which most would assume to be Fazbear Entertainment. However, they're asked in another tape if, quote, do you know a place called Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex? I'll take your silence as a yes. And besides, I know you know it because the technicians who work for Pizzaplex know you. Or rather, I guess it would be better to say they think they do. Which means that they wouldn't be dealing with Fazbear Entertainment. Otherwise, they would know about the Pizzaplex because they know the company, not because the technicians know them. We know that the fourth therapist characterizes them as a loner, and their second therapist considers them a hacker, mentioning their aptitude with technology. Client 46 also has a relatively normal family, but lies to the therapist about having a troubled past. They hacked some form of system and glitched out some of the animatronics, was caught on tape talking to what the therapist described as rabbit ears, and they remain unbothered when finding out two of their former therapists went missing and one was found dead, mangled in machinery, as if they're used to death and or already knew about the therapists. So those are all the things we know as fact for Client 46. However, there's also some stuff we can infer, but since it's me connecting the dots, there may be some accidental bias, so I'm keeping this separate from the rest of the facts. The client here does appear to be younger, given the tonal shift between the therapists between when they're talking to Vanessa and talking to Client 46, which could be the reason the tapes with Vanessa were included. Going back to the age issue, when being asked about encrypted communications which seem to be manipulative in nature, the therapist says, quote, well, the texts say it looked to them like it was an attempt to manipulate you, or maybe to lure you somewhere. This is the same language used when educating kids about predators and online safety. Hell, I'm pretty sure I feel like I've heard that exact line in grade school. So how can we know if this is specifically Gregory, you ask? Like, sure, it's a young boy, but how could we know if it's Gregory if we aren't actually like given a name? There are a couple clues to indicate this. Firstly, he is associated with some company related to Fazbear Entertainment. We know it's probably not Fazbear Entertainment directly, but with the technicians sending over footage of one of your clients, you can guess that the companies are related. So it would most likely be a subsidiary of Fazbear Entertainment. Using the other discs as a time frame, we know that Vanessa has not yet been promoted to security guard, and that Lewis, the IT guy from Fnaf AR, is currently working in marketing, not IT. So at least disc 1 takes place before Fnaf AR, and seemingly by disc 5, they're in their spots that they were in during Fnaf AR, with IT questioning Vanessa's search history. This leads me to the conclusion that the company they're associated with is the one controlling the distribution and creation of the animatronics in special delivery. But what companies have we seen that control renting out and creating animatronics? That's right, Afton Robotics. Present in sister location, and the reason there was no Funtime Chica in that game, but why there was one in Ultimate Custom Night. The company being named after, and originally run by the one who caused the company's rep to plummet in the first place, would also understandably have psyche valves for anyone associated with them, so it explains that as well. So, running with this idea that Afton Robotics is controlling the Fnaf AR animatronics, how does Gregory fit into all of this? Well, for that, we need to work out who this potential bunny-eared person is. Some assume Glitch Trap, some think it's Vanny. It could also technically be Burn Trap. However, the therapist never really gives us a color of the ears, only the detail that they look like bunny ears.
Burn Trap's ears are horrifically destroyed, so he's out. Glitch Trap is a computer code with no physical form, so that just leaves Vanny, which also discounts the theory that Client 46 is Vanny. This also makes sense with the timeline of the CDs, since Vanessa mentions making a bunny costume in disc 11, moves to a new location after disc 12, and the bunny ears are mentioned on disc 15. The disc after that is also the last one with Client 46, knowing that they aren't coming back. This to me suggests that Vanessa and Gregory moved around the same time, which would also explain why Gregory was being evaluated, since he was associated with the company through Vanessa, although that can't be confirmed. But there are also other odd details that I picked up on that I wanted to address, like how we never hear Client 46 talk, but they do end up responding, as we see in discs 6 and 8. They say something, but the recording doesn't pick it up, or their response is wiped out, much like how Gregory was wiped from the Pizzaplex's system. 46 also shows up to the Pizzaplex randomly, unannounced, despite not working there, and in the picture that showcased the bunny ears, we can also hear that the camera is distorted around them, but that the therapist still says that the blob, I guess, looks like Client 46. So why would the camera be distorted around us? Seems to me like it could be when you take a picture of a computer screen with your phone and you get those like lines going across the screen, or like how shapeshifters in Supernatural have the laser eyes when they're on camera. It seems like this person isn't entirely human, perhaps part robot. Robot speculation aside, I feel confident in the fact that Client 46 is Gregory. The only issue I have now is why was he hacking the animatronics? He definitely had a purpose, since to quote disc 16, what I understand is that the glitch stopped being a glitch and turned into an intentional set of subroutines that were aimed at creating the same thing the glitch created. Those subroutines seem to have come from you. Can you explain that? And don't worry there, Doc, I think I can explain it. There is either a good or evil motive for this hack, and I don't really know which is more likely, but I have a feeling as to which ones. But let's look at both. The evil motive would be that Gregory is working with William and Vanessa, so he hacked the animatronics and made sure that the glitch he caused instilled itself into the robots so that his work wouldn't be undone, to perhaps distract them from what's going on underneath the Pizzaplex. Hence why he would be talking to Vanny all nonchalant, like seems to be the case in that photo I mentioned. The good intention, however, which is the one I think would push the story further ahead and is probably the more likely one, is that Gregory is indeed a crying child robot. He learned of his father's misdeeds and whatnot over the years, and before being transferred into the next aged up model, he ran away. Over the next 40 some odd years, he would learn about coding in order to hopefully be able to counter what his father had been doing. But once he heard of the Fnaf 6 fire, he figured it was all over. Once Fazbear Entertainment came back with a VR game and a special delivery system for new animatronics though, he realized what he needed to do. So he got on Vanessa's good side through possible manipulation and looking like a 5-year-old to get close to the company. He lied about his family history to the therapist so that they would keep seeing him and he would have more time in the company building so that he could then hack the animatronics, causing them to malfunction in an effort to get the company or the project at least shut down. Hence why the glitch ended up being a closed loop where it kept replicating itself so it couldn't be deleted. But when the company didn't shut down and instead built a giant mall complex, Gregory went to investigate, hacking the cameras in an effort to conceal his identity, which resulted in him finding the Vanny mask and learning that Vanessa was under his father's control. Since the line about the bunny ears goes, quote, "You're talking to someone or something," it's hard to tell. But it also being a still shot, we don't know if he is really talking, or just shocked, or talking to himself about the situation. 46 talking to themselves had also been well established at this point. He could have also lost his memory when he climbed inside of Freddy, because he could have been inside Freddy when he was being repaired, and it could have just caused a whole lot of issues. This association with Vanessa and Vanny, however, is why he's willing to get ice cream with her after the Princess Quest ending. That's still the only way to explain it. Them knowing each other is the only reason he would get ice cream with a woman who just spent 6 hours now is trying to kill him. And it explains how he knows to complete the Princess Quest games in order to save her soul. Now, based on the points I made last time, there are a few things that we need to go over. Firstly, the breaking and entering does not apply in the actual game, but can come into play later on. He is 100% trespassing though, despite being locked inside. He actively hid inside of Freddy, like in his stomach, instead of leaving the Pizzaplex, which would make this trespassing. Every time I mention stealing, like in the merch, the security badges, even Freddy, there's no arguing that. He does in fact steal those. The main argument against these is that, well, he needs to do this to survive, which is blatantly not true. Okay, Freddy informs Gregory that the doors will reopen at 6 a.m. All Gregory needs to do at that point is just stay in Freddy's green room or the area behind it until 6. Nothing else was necessary in order for him to survive. The only problems occur when Gregory tries to get out sooner. He causes his own problems. Vanny only ends up knowing Gregory is in the Lost and Found because she put him there as Vanessa. So, with that logic in mind, Vanny would not have known that Gregory was in Freddy or Freddy's green room. He says that himself. And Vanessa does not check inside Freddy when you approach her while piloting him. So as far as the argument that he needed to do this to survive, no he didn't. Unless he ends up making the problems himself, which would completely destroy his case. So, glad we got that settled. One of the other points of contention was really everything else he did was in self-defense. He had to destroy the animatronics. He had to kill Vanny in the phaser blast ending, otherwise they would have killed him. But while self-defense does sometimes justify killing in order to protect yourself or your loved ones, this is typically used for human-on-human interactions. Human on robot interactions wouldn't necessarily fall under self-defense. The animatronics would have to be proven that they didn't intend to harm Gregory, and this could be done using code analysis and camera footage. However, we know that the animatronics were hacked, and whoever Client 46 is did the hacking. Now, if Client 46 is Gregory, which in the context of this world they would know, and the evidence seems to actually point to, the fact that the animatronics were after him could be seen as his fault, since he actually disturbed their original programming. This is also where the footage of him in the Pizzaplex would have come out, particularly the image where he was talking to someone with rabbit ears, thus showing the jury that Gregory and Vanny had a personal relationship, further hurting his case. Gregory by no means had to destroy the animatronics. He chose to do it. Freddy even asks him not to. Gregory didn't do it because he had to, he did it because he wanted revenge. He even says it himself, quote, "They get what they deserve." He was destroying them for revenge and to get the parts for Freddy, not so that they wouldn't hurt him, since after all they can still come and kill him after he destroys them. So he does destroy property because he wanted the animatronics to suffer, not because he had to in order to be safe again. Again, could have just hid in Freddy's room or somewhere else. People are also saying that he's homeless, so he has to steal. Firstly, homeless or not, it's still illegal to steal. And secondly, I don't think that he needs Roxy balloons, action figures, and stuffed characters in order to survive another day. I'm not saying that he shouldn't keep himself alive, I'm just saying that what he's doing is illegal, which is true no matter who you are. And anything I included in those numbers was not a story item, and instead the extra items that you do not need in order to beat the game. And you didn't need to steal Freddy at all. There is no justification for him running off with Freddy other than the fact that they're friends. But then again, it's grand larceny and illegal. One commenter decided to try and provide legal defense for Gregory in a lighthearted manner because that was also the point of the video, so I'd like to reply to Jason Ross's defense for the theft of security badges. Quote from his comment, "While this is technically a crime, I think he could make a strong case with any halfways decent lawyer that he did so out of necessity. He stole stuff to help further his attempts to escape unlawful confinement and other crimes committed against him. Stealing those items he stole was necessary to save himself. He would never have survived the night if he didn't steal." First of all, you just outright admitted that it was a crime, which an actual attorney would have torn to shreds. Secondly, like I've been saying, he could have been hiding the entire time, okay? He would have survived if he had just hid until 6. He doesn't escape any sooner than 6 a.m. You progressing throughout the game just makes the time go to 6. He never escapes sooner. He did not have to steal the security badges. Unlawful confinement, as you said, is described as whoever wrongfully restrains a person as to prevent that person to move beyond a certain restricted limit is said to have committed the offense of wrongful confinement. However, nobody restrains Gregory, literally.
as well. Like, they don't actually like time anything. He gets himself locked in the Pizzaplex. Nobody locked him in there intentionally. The doors close automatically at midnight, and he had plenty of time to leave, but didn't, and he chose to climb inside Freddy, which also ruins your argument against trespassing, which was also wrongful confinement. And for all intents and purposes, in the eyes of the law and any outsiders, Vanessa was actively trying to help him. There are recordings of her claiming to have called the police, which would have been verified certainly, but even if she had called them and claimed something else, the record of her calling 911 would be there. Most of Ross's case relies on unlawful confinement. However, staying in somewhere and then wanting to leave does not constitute unlawful confinement. And to the public, Vanessa was trying to help get him home, but he was avoiding her. We know that she was trying to kill him, but the public doesn't. Now for the biggest issue that everyone seemed to have with this list, the one that I'm sure y'all clicked on this video for. The claim that killing Vanny was murder and not self-defense. And this claim is really the reason I wanted to make this video, because I can't reply to every single comment that was referring to this, okay? Self-defense can be a defense to an assault, battery, and criminal homicide because it always involves the use of force. Most states have special requirements when the defendant uses deadly force in self-defense. Deadly force is defined as any force that could potentially kill. An individual does not have to actually die for the force to be considered deadly. Examples of deadly force are the use of a knife, gun, vehicle, or even bare hands when there is a disparity in size between the two individuals. Or, in this case, the use of animatronic robots to kill Vanny, as Gregory does in the phaser blast ending, which would also set a precedent for robots being counted as deadly force. To successfully claim self-defense, a defendant must prove 4 elements. First, with exceptions, the defendant must prove that he or she was confronted with an unprovoked attack. Second, the defendant must prove that the threat of injury or death was imminent. Third, the defendant must prove that the degree of force used in self-defense was objectively reasonable under the circumstances. And fourth, the defendant must prove that he or she had an objectively reasonable fear that he or she was going to be injured or killed unless he or she used self-defense. The Model Penal Code defines self-defense as justifiable when the actor believes that such force is immediately necessary for the purposes of protecting himself against the use of unlawful force by such other person on the present occasion. Okay, so I'm willing to admit that the attack was certainly unprovoked. Vanny did not need to come after him in order to get him out of the Pizzaplex. However, that second issue, the proof of threat of injury or death was imminent, is where things get complicated. At no point in the game does Vanny directly threaten Gregory with any words. Her voice lines include, "See you soon," "Disassemble Freddy," "There you are you having fun yet?" "Laughter," and "Let's have some fun." While menacing, none of these involve a direct threat. At no point in the game does she brandish a knife or even send the security bots after Gregory to disassemble him. She only sends the 3 main ones to collect him, who also make no appearance in this ending, therefore do not count. Yes, when she catches us we get a game over screen, but that's just us losing the game. That isn't necessarily us being killed. Us thinking that we get killed is simply an assumption because we don't see what happens next. However, in this case, since we made it to the end, Gregory had never been caught by Vanny. While yes, she does end up destroying an animatronic, it was just an animatronic. That's not really a threat on Gregory. Now, let's skip point number 3 for a minute and then move on to point number 4. That the defendant must prove that he or she had an objectively reasonable fear that he or she was going to be injured or killed unless they used self-defense. While yes, Gregory is a child, or seemingly a child, who would have a more extreme view of the world, he literally spent 6 hours running and hiding from Vanny, where he ended up surviving. In fact, he was right at the Pizzaplex door to leave, but instead of leaving, he chose to go after Vanny, thus turning this act of possible self-defense into a possible act of vigilantism, or even turning Gregory into the aggressor. He and Freddy went to confront Vanny. He says himself maybe that they can catch her in her room at Phaser Blast. Gregory could have left and survived, but chose not to, meaning that he cannot claim self-defense in an altercation that he created. And now for the final point. The defendant must prove that the degree of force used in self-defense was objectively reasonable under the circumstance. Now, being a child, there is a leeway as to what he would deem reasonable force, but in this case,
it is absolutely not reasonable force. We see how destroyed Freddy is after he gets disassembled, okay? His chest and torso are gaping open. He had his insides ripped out. And then he even ends up like dying in an animatronic sense, even though his body and his head have been shown to work separately. And then Gregory orders the same thing done to Vanny, a human who would be alive as the animatronics ripped her ribs and intestines from her body. Does that sound reasonable to you? Because killing in self-defense is easiest to claim when the death you cause is quick or painless. But Vanny suffered, and suffered hard. Even criminals on death row do not get this treatment. A serial killer with more kills than Vanny would just get the simple 2-dose lethal injection, where the first dose actually is intended to dull the pain of the second dose. Under absolutely no circumstances would Vanny being torn apart so badly that the comic panels won't even show it be considered the proper amount of force. Especially when he could have said anything to stop or break or even kill. He could have just said kill. This is absolutely over the top, especially given that Gregory seems to have known her if he is indeed Client 46, which is also hinted at during the Princess Quest ending, but since that's a different ending, that doesn't really count here. Which, if he was Client 46, that would have appeared in court. So what kind of charges and juvenile time is Gregory facing because of this? Well, if Gregory had Mac Murdock as a lawyer, let's say, or as someone who's also a really good lawyer, they could possibly argue that this would rather be manslaughter than murder. However, Gregory knows what disassemble means, so an argument that this was an accident would be very tough to pull off. But looking at the minimum sentence, there are 3 possible outcomes for how he'd be treated. 1, the child is so young or mentally incompetent to not understand what they've done and are excused for criminal and civil liability from their actions. Not the case for Gregory, who knew full well what was going on the entire time throughout this game. 2, the child is old enough to understand what they have done, but not old enough or lacking in evidence of sufficient premeditation to charge them as an adult, so they are charged and tried as juveniles, which could be the case for Gregory and is the most likely outcome. And then 3, the child is old enough to understand what they have done and there is evidence of planning and premeditation such that they can be deemed to have acted as an adult might, and they are charged as an adult, with the exception that minors may not be sentenced to death. Now, this could be the way that the courts decided to go, since after all, Gregory did intend on confronting Vanny, since he could have left the Pizzaplex but instead went after her. If he is Client 46 as well, the images of him breaking into the Pizzaplex before could be interpreted as premeditation, especially if he was investigating the Pizzaplex because of Vanny. The state could also argue that his intention was always to kill her. So, with these rules in mind, we will look at a minimum and maximum sentence. The minimum would be a manslaughter charge. However, unlike murder, manslaughter does not carry an automatic sentence of life imprisonment. It remains, however, an opinion for the court. But looking at the situation, things wouldn't look too good for Gregory. A 9-year sentence, which is not uncommon, would allow the offender to be paroled after serving 3 years of their sentence. If a firearm is involved in the offense though, a minimum sentence of 4 years is required. And while the weapon was not a firearm, it could be argued that since she was a distance from him that it could also be considered similar. So at least Gregory would be looking at 3 to 9 years for manslaughter. If he was charged with murder, however, he would absolutely be tried as an adult. And since this is the worst case, we'll go with first-degree murder since the court could consider this planned and deliberate. Those convicted of first-degree murder all receive the same sentence: life imprisonment with parole eligibility after 25 years. A 20-year-old convicted of first-degree murder will be eligible for parole at the age of 45, and if they behave themselves, then they're likely to receive parole. But considering Gregory's personality and your comments on that top 10 video, I doubt that he'd admit responsibility, show remorse. He doesn't seem like that kind of person. Although after 25 years, he may start looking at things differently, with new eyes, if you will. This is also if he ends up actually aging because he's a real human and not a robot like we're all thinking. And if he doesn't age, a whole new investigation is gonna happen. So let's not get into that. The main issue I've been having is whether William is dead or alive. And there are a couple different things to consider here. Firstly, he is seemingly in a new endoskeleton, which would indicate that he's dead and Glitchtrap's consciousness is just being transferred into Burntrap's spot via the recharge station. But his head is clearly visible. You can see his skull and his actual human jaw, meaning that he could still be holding on to this world via that head, especially given who we're talking about here. The most stubborn to ever grace our screens. This also can't be a new endo, and just the model that they're using for the others since it was easier and they could release the game faster. This seems to be indicated by the way that Burntrap walks. If this was a new endoskeleton, why would he be shambling like a zombie? But the claws and repaired sections to the actual endo also seem to indicate that this is also a new endo and possibly even Glamrock Bonnie's. So there's a whole lot of wrong going on here. All the points are intersecting and it's not fun. Originally, I was against the whole Glamrock Bonnie endoskeleton thing because, well, frankly, the body and the suit kind of disproved it for me, but I think I might have found a way to make it work. However, looking at the model, I'm still not 100% sure. If this was the Glamrock Bonnie endo, it would need to have broader shoulders and actually be shorter. Like even scaling the Glamrock endo so that they're the same height, the endos, when posed the same and lined up, just they don't match. There are similarities, of course, between the two designs, but there aren't enough similarities where I can call this even really above 50%. There's also the issue of the muscles being woven throughout the body, or maybe those are nerve fibers. If it was just the head, I'd understand, since they could have just pulled the old endo head and put it onto the new body. Since all the parts were intertwined, Afton's head would have come with it. But with the muscles throughout the rest of the endo, that's way too intricate to actually have been placed there. And they would only be there and not dangling if it had been stuck there after being shoved full of machine parts. I don't think that they're taking super glue to glue these fibers back onto a new endoskeleton. If Afton was going to transfer his head to a new endo, it wouldn't come with the rest of his body bits. It wouldn't. That's not how it works. Which would mean this would have to be Springtrap's endoskeleton, which also explains why it's so run down, why he shambles, and why he hardly has any casing. And Springtrap's design also seems to change from game to game. From FNAF 3 to FNAF 6, he was totally different, so him changing again in Security Breach seems like no big deal in comparison. It's basically normal for him to get a newer and seemingly scarier attempt at his design with a new game. And at least this has an understandable progression from the last game and even from FNAF 3, since it's more run down and not just a bigger head like Scraptrap. It's like he sold his soul for a bigger head and then the demon kind of made a joke out of it. The most reasonable assumption that I have for what happened though was that he was given the hands of Glamrock Bonnie since it has the claws and just he wasn't given the entire endoskeleton. But then again, his arms have the bits of muscle and nerve fibers as well, which means that it would have to have been his old one, it would have to have been there from the start, it would have to be the arm of the old endoskeleton, which is a whole other conundrum because Scraptrap was missing an arm and Springtrap didn't have any casing on his foot, yet here we are. I just think that we have to kind of leave this one up to artistic license and accept that it's meant to be the same endoskeleton, just with a replacement part or two from Glamrock Bonnie instead of like the entire endoskeleton. It makes sense, honestly, and it's really the only reasonable explanation that we have. Unless the colors are wrong on the images that I was looking at and the bits on the hands are just meant to be melted casing, which is possible, but I doubt it. As for if he's wanted, dead, or alive, I think this version of Afton is actually finally dead. And honestly, I'm happy about that because it means that even if he's still here, we can kill him off for good. This is the most logical conclusion to me because, well, other than him basically being only a head, this guy has had multiple backslides of, oh, I'm dead, just kidding. And this time around, while we instantly predicted that he had indeed survived, I think that Scott is finally flipping the narrative on us. We predicted it, so it's not gonna happen. Afton is no longer connected to his body, as we can clearly see from the formation of Glitchtrap. And Glitchtrap being created would only be possible if Afton died, since the one you should not have killed was dead set on keeping him breathing. But Burntrap, this guy doesn't even have lungs anymore. So yeah, this version of Afton's body is dead, but his consciousness lives on. Like how there's like the conspiracy that Walt Disney froze his head. Yeah, well, that's kind of what they did with Glitchtrap. And then that programming was probably uploaded into his old host, or I guess vessel, since I've been rewatching Supernatural. Basically, this guy would be impossible if he wasn't just Afton's code loaded onto an endoskeleton. Plus, the eyes are clearly robotic this time around with purple pupils, rather than the previous iterations that had seemingly real eyes, Afton's actual eyes, since it was in suit mode after he got snapped, and opening his head in those like secret FNAF 3 screens revealed that it was actually like his eyes because they were seemingly in the same place. So, all in all, here's the story of Burntrap as far as I can tell. During the FNAF 6 fire, Afton passes out. Not dead, but still somehow alive thanks to the one you should not have killed, Crying Child. This leads to the events of Ultimate Custom Night that sees Afton stuck in his own mind trying to escape so that his spirit can move on. But Crying Child, represented by a golden bear like the one who crushed his skull, tries to keep him stuck, until eventually he throws everything that he has at him. 50-20 mode. After being so weakened by the fire, William survives this attack on his mind, and Crying Child's spirit is set free, hence the spasming bear at the end of that mode. That's him burning as the fire sets his soul free. William's soul then latches onto the nearest thing that it can find, one of the hard drives in the storage room that the Scrap Trap animatronic was being kept in. One that gets scanned to create the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience as the company tries to rebuild its reputation. Then, not wanting to waste the land that was bought for their company, Fazbear Entertainment begins building a new pizzaplex on top of their old location. Whether this is due to Glitch Trap possessing someone higher up at the company through the game or someone just wanting to save money is up in the air, but the remains of the FNAF 6 simulated pizzeria are buried under the pizzaplex's foundation. That's when Vanessa comes along, our player character from Help Wanted, who reassembles the 16 cassette tapes in an effort to destroy Afton once and for all, but ultimately fails. When our mind is distracted by following Tape Girl's instructions, William locks us in our mind and in the Princess Quest minigame that would later get ported to an arcade cabinet for insurance purposes. And by insurance I mean like insurance on Vanessa so that she wouldn't easily be able to escape. As Vanny, William then uses the animatronics to dig out his body and put his old endoskeleton in a recharge station so that when he's able to transfer himself back into it, he'll be able to move. After all, at this point, he's not a spirit, but simply coding, which means that in another game, if he is still alive, we'll actually be able to kill him off. He also gives his old suit some upgrades in the form of Glamrock Bonnie's hands and right foot. Why would he not go with a new, more powerful endo, you ask? Because it's William and his Spring Bonnie suit. It's his body in there. Of course he'd want it back. He's been that way for like at least 40 years at this point. It's all he knows. Then as Gregory and Freddy jump down into the pit, William can sense it. Either because he's an animatronic, because one or both of them are meant to be his kids, or something else, he activates his body even though it's not fully charged and tries to take over Freddy. He's not fully charged, hence the shambling, which Gregory ends up preventing with fire, which has surely traumatized Afton by now, and considering how he's only code, this time fire would actually finish the job. Eventually, the place actually catches on fire, and Freddy and Gregory escape, but the blob grabs hold of William. Whether it was to save him or seal his fate is unknown, but this almost certainly isn't the end of William Afton's story.
Who is the ghost with the most? Is it you, Gregory? Welcome back, my fellow gamers, to another FNAF Security Breach Theory video. Today we'll be talking about everyone's favorite Security Breach character because, well, we all play as him, Gregory. Okay, so admittedly, Glamrock Freddy is my favorite character, and then probably Glamrock Chica, and then Vanny, then Gregory, but he ranks in the top at least because he is the protagonist, and that's just how that cookie crumbles. But speaking of cookies, can you eat them if you're a ghost? Perhaps not. Part of the reason why I was initially suspicious of Gregory being a ghost was his very mysterious origin. The Pizzaplex seems to have no records of him and is unable to locate his parents or even any trace of him in the system, implying he somehow, I guess, snuck into the Pizzaplex, or perhaps he is a victim that never left. I know we get that ending where Gregory is sleeping in the streets homeless, but don't worry, I'll be talking about that too and how I think that could actually play into my theory of Gregory being a ghost and possibly a victim of villainous and murderous animatronics. But more on that later. Getting back to those cookies, let's talk about them. Can you eat cookies or drink drinks if you're dead? Well, I personally do not think you can. The drinks and food wouldn't be able to be processed by your ghostly form, so it really wouldn't make sense for you to be able to. We've all seen what happens when someone like Slimer from Ghostbuster eats food. It kind of just goes right through him, and if anything, it turns into like slime or ectoplasm. You can't really like process it properly. It's pretty gross. Now, Gregory never seems to be compelled to eat, so we don't know for sure, but it also seems odd that you would be collecting so many tasty and limited edition drinks and food items without being able to eat them, which in this game, for some reason, you just can't do that. It's especially weird actually because when you play in Help Wanted, you can eat things, and that's like a VR game, so I don't understand how that all works. And throughout the course of the evening, Gregory doesn't even express that he is hungry, and that is a long time and a lot of running around to do and not to be hungry from. If you're alive, that is. Which, like I said, I really think this is more evidence that Gregory may no longer be considered as such. Spirits don't really have a need to get hungry as they don't have proper bods, so they don't need to like fuel them. They're just ghosty ghosts. They don't have physical forms, you know? Aside from not being able to eat, you also don't seem to feel much of any normal human pains. Gregory gets tired periodically from prolonged running and crawling in terms of his stamina bar, but he doesn't actually express getting tired in terms of like being sleepy. He's never like, oh my gosh, I'm like so tired. Okay, so like maybe when Moondrop is coming around trying to make you sleepy, but I don't know, that's some weird stuff. That's a thing that every time I talk about it, I'm like, I don't even know if this should be in this game. Considering how late Gregory is staying up for a normal human child, it's pretty odd that he doesn't ever express being like tired from staying up too late. Of course, if you're a robot, then the normal everyday pains experienced in human life wouldn't affect you. You don't need to sleep, so why would you get tired? Which, you know, he could also be an animatronic. Sure, we see him trying to sleep in an alley in one of the endings, but we don't actually hear him express feeling tired or ever see him fully asleep. So I'm thinking either animatronic or ghosty ghost. Take your pick. We're focusing on ghosts though in this theory, so let's get back to that. Right at the beginning of this game, I was pretty suspicious of Gregory when it came to him being a real living kid. Something was weird about him. He just, I don't know, there's something off about Gregory. I just look at him and I'm like, I don't know, what's up with you? Are you real? Are you a real boy? Right at the beginning, he generally just seemed to be too big to actually fit into Freddy's stomach cavity. Especially when you learn, at least initially, there was also a Fazwatch dispenser in there somehow. I know these stomachs are in theory possibly based off of Williams' designs, which were about capturing kids, or at least seemed to be from his sinister perspective. But in this game, even Glamrock Freddy seems to think Gregory moving around inside of him is dangerous, as that is an area that is really only meant to be large enough for moving things like birthday cakes and piñatas. I imagine even the piñatas would actually have to be really small though, because that cavity does not look big enough for a piñata to me. Also, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever seen a birthday cake for a kid's party that was large enough to be considered the size of a small child. Like, how big would that cake have to be for this to work? Like, he's have to be carrying around giant cakes in his stomach. Also, am I just not eating large enough cakes? Is that what is happening here? Am I missing out? Are people giving me tiny little like dinky cakes for my birthday? If that's the reality though, if I'm not just like getting tiny cakes and people are ripping me off on my birthday, I'm gonna be real sad. Even when I make cakes though, I don't make them that big. Let me know your thoughts about cake sizes down in the comments below, and let me know how big the biggest birthday cake you've ever seen or made in person was. Maybe there's something I'm missing out on here. Maybe I'm just not making or eating large enough cakes. Sweet, ginormous birthday cakes. Where are you? Another thing that seems odd is you never really wear the clothes that you collect. At least not as far as we can tell or see. Now, they might increase your stats to just have them like in your inventory, but as far as we know, Gregory never puts those items on. Is this because he always has to remain in the outfit that he died in? Because, you know, he's a freaking ghost? Perhaps the only clothes he can wear are the ones he's already wearing. And I know what you're thinking. Okay, but then what about the Fazwatch? Well, the Fazwatch could still be an item that Gregory could have equipped because it doesn't actually interfere with the ethereal clothes that he's already wearing. After all, the Fazwatch is more of an accessory really than like an outfit choice. Also, if my theory is right and he is a spooktacular spirit, it's also very likely that he's like a poltergeist who can interact with and hold objects in the real world, like the flashlight, the laser blaster, his Fazwatch, and other such items that he is able to use. Though even then, you don't typically see poltergeists put on physical clothing for some reason. Ghosts might be able to change their appearance, but usually not by physically dressing up. Like a sheet. I think that's the most I've ever seen ghosts wear. I feel like in Beetlejuice they wear sheets at one point, right? They're trying to scare everybody. But that's one piece. I feel like if you had to like have pants and like a shirt and shoes and socks and all that stuff, that's like a lot of clothing for you to have to like maintain a physical form to wear it. So I think it's just too much work for a ghost? I don't know. I would propose when it came to Gregory being a ghost at the Pizzaplex that he was a victim who went missing there. Perhaps that's why there are no records of him, because Afton had them wiped clean. I imagine he would find a way to do that for all of his victims here so that he could preserve his hunting ground. It also seems odd that Gregory has no relatives to speak of. The game leads us to believe this is because Gregory is homeless, and even possibly suggests that he or someone at least may have been living in the Pizzaplex prior to the events of Security Breach, with hidden alcoves where it looks like someone someone has been kind of like squatting and living. And with one of the endings showing Gregory living in a gutter, huddling under a newspaper for warmth. Is it also possible that Gregory would always be cold if he was a ghost? So could his seeking warmth in that ending also be a hint that he's no longer of this world? That might be a bit of a stretch, but it's still something to consider at least. I mean, ghosts are usually very cold. That's, you know, they say when a ghost passes through you feel like a chill. So I'm just saying it could be a connection. I know I'm stretching, but just come with me on this ghostly journey. Please, come with me. It'll be fun. Despite the fact that Security Breach seems to want us to think that Gregory is homeless, it's also possible that he simply can't remember his home. After all, for being homeless, he looks relatively well kept and well dressed. And who gave him that band-aid on his cheek, or where did he get it from if he doesn't have literally anyone around to look after him? Did he run away from home? Or is it that Gregory no longer remembers his home because his life was taken from him during a visit to the Pizzaplex and now he basically haunts it, his soul trapped due to his unsolved murder and the traumatic nature of his death? Perhaps this experience was so traumatic that he doesn't even remember that he's dead, which is why he doesn't even try to communicate it to Freddy or even really reflect on it himself while alone. I think if he is a ghost, he doesn't really fully understand that himself. This could also imply why the real and true ending for this game has to be in defeating William Afton, aka Burn Trap. It could be that this is Gregory's unfinished business, and the ending we get if Vanny is redeemed with Vanessa, Freddy, and Gregory on the hill is actually symbolizing that they have all crossed over and now get to be together and at peace. After all, that whole like hill with the tree and everything, it definitely reminds me of the gravestones that we've seen before in FNAF, so to me it feels very like ghost vibes, in my opinion. Of course, one theory we've been discussing on Top 10 Gaming for a while since before the release of Security Breach is that Gregory could actually be Crying Child. If so, this also kind of fits with our ghost theory. I mean, sure, Crying Child could be an animatronic replacement child who was like created after the original Crying Child's death. Gregory could be a lifelike animatronic as such, but it's also possible that Gregory, if he is a ghost, is actually the spirit of Crying Child, because although we have theories about where that spirit is, we've never really like fully gotten any confirmation on those theories. I don't think. They're still kind of theories. Perhaps that is why he is so closely tied to the Pizzaplex, which was also built on top of the Freddy's location we manage in FNAF 6, Pizzeria Simulator, where it's believed all the souls were gathered as part of Henry's plot to finally defeat Afton and then set all his victims' souls free. And if you still aren't sure if Gregory is Crying Child or not, that's fine. I still say they have lots of similarities, but Gregory doesn't need to be Crying Child for him to also be a ghost. It just seems like another theoretical connection that supports the ghost theory that we're discussing here.
Firstly, we have to establish whether this would be something new or if it would have been this way since the start, and there are a few indicators that might surprise you. In my latest playthrough, the Security Breach But It's Ruined by Mods video that released on Saturday, April 2nd on this channel, I made a note to point out that Freddy doesn't really seem to care when you get locked inside the Pizzaplex. He also seemed to care more about the fact that you got a crappy Mr. Hippo magnet as your free gift, and sounds more disappointed about that than the whole locked in and might get killed by a serial killer thing. Which begs the question, is he really all that disappointed? Obviously, if he was blatantly evil, he would have just turned us over to Vanessa, but if he was really crafty, he would gain our trust first. After all, he should have Glitch Trap's code inside him, right? Well, let's look at what he does before the doors close. He sends us to get a pass in order to free him from his green room, and then everything seems to go well. But then, for some random reason, without ever mentioning this before, he tells us that he senses we are broken and that he needs to bring us to medical so that we can get fixed up or something like that. Whether this was meant to be a nod to Crying Child or not doesn't matter in this case, okay? The point here is that it doesn't actually do anything. We get a run-in with Vanessa that later gets turned into a TikTok meme, but other than that, we stay the same. We don't get healed, we don't get a band-aid because we could have had it from the start. We get in that booth, instantly turn around and move the curtain to peep outside and watch that scene. After that, Freddy doesn't mention how we're still broken, and I don't know about you, but me standing in a booth isn't really gonna heal me, okay? it seems odd if you ask me. Especially since now with that little pit stop, even if you go full steam ahead making no stops, sprinting the whole time, you can't make it out of the doors. That one little interaction is the 30 seconds that we needed in order to escape out the front doors, but thanks to Freddy, now we don't make it. And you can't use his programming as an excuse for this either, because if we want to use programming as evidence, this man was supposed to be controlled by Afton's virus, and the glitching out should have messed him up. Plus, his coding isn't designed to scan children that are literally inside his body. If he picked up on the injury when Gregory was outside of his stomach for the first time and he was scanning us, why not take him to medical instantly, or as soon as you got out of the green room? And again, why make it seem like your coding is letting you scan a kid that's inside you, when nobody should be in there? Unless that's the point. What if Afton's virus did grab a hold of Freddy and just made everything seem like it was fine? Having an animatronic protect you and gaining the kid's trust is a lot better than just nabbing him out of nowhere. Plus, I mean, there would have been plenty of times this kid could have been gotten, particularly when Freddy gets grabbed by the Moondrop animatronic right outside of Parts and Service. You're telling me that Moondrop, the daycare attendant, told Vanessa that Freddy was in the Parts and Service room, but didn't mention that we were in the recharge station right next to Parts and Service? I mean, he knew, like he waved at us while taking Freddy away. But Vanessa knows that just grabbing Gregory won't accomplish Afton's true goal. So instead, what do? They stage a fake interrogation where Freddy once again looks like the good guy, and then she leaves through the most inconvenient way for her possible. Why would she leave to Rockstar Row when she could easily come our way and then head to the main atrium? That's where Gregory was. That's where all the animatronics have been spotting him. And then, after Vanessa leaves Freddy in Parts and Service so that his casing can be put on a new endo after corporate gives the go-ahead, she doesn't seem to be suspicious that he's walking around Rockstar Row. Like, who would have repaired him if not Gregory? There is literally no other living human in the Pizzaplex at this point, and the whole containment cylinder thing is so that it protects humans on the outside. Why is Vanessa so nonchalant about Freddy walking around? It was something that confused me in my first playthrough. I figured that Vanessa would just pull us out of Freddy if we got too close, but no. And a reasonable explanation to that is that she isn't sus because she knows the plan. And also, it's worth noting that Afton has spent all this time in a burnt down Pizzaplex that also contained his daughter, who has pulled this exact same scheme on us prior to this game, okay? So he could have picked up on it from her, either while they were burning, while she was trying to impress him, or maybe if she is controlling the blob and it's not actually Funtime Freddy. Just saying. And maybe I'm wrong about that, okay? It's entirely possible. I mean, after all of this, it is a FNAF game, right? Where not everything makes sense for the sake of the story that Scott wants to tell. But what about the post-game? What about after we supposedly end Afton? What then? Is Freddy on the up and up? Or is there enough of Afton in there for us to be in danger? Well, it's actually a pretty interesting idea, since there is the distinct possibility that Afton is now controlling Freddy. Sure, when we haven't defeated Afton's body and he ends up possessing Freddy, we get killed instantly and Freddy gets purple eyes. However, in the actual ending to this boss fight, we supposedly stop Burn Trap. But then, the area around us starts collapsing. What if Afton was using Freddy as a means of escape when he knew that his situation was dire? I mean, honestly, if we think about this, Afton was downloading his consciousness wirelessly into Glamrock Freddy while we were fighting him. That was the whole point of the fight. But would it really reset to 0 once he stops and tries again? Or would it just be like pausing a download? Honestly, with the kind of buffoonery in this series, I don't think we can discount the possibility that Afton was simply just putting a pause on the download in an effort to eventually still take over Freddy and potentially spend time with his robot son. Or maybe just escape into the world once more. But like, seriously, he was transferring his consciousness into Glamrock Freddy by putting his hand on a monitor. And not even a monitor, like a dinosaur monitor at that. I don't think that we can like just go like, oh no, he's not in Freddy. He's dead. He's gone forever. That's no. If he can transfer his brain from an animatronic into another animatronic through touching a computer screen where he can see the guy, that's no. If you think that Afton's done, you have not been paying attention to this series at all. And if you think that Glam Rock Freddy is safe, again, you don't know the series in the slightest. I hate that I was right about Freddy, because eventually it's gonna be revealed that he's evil. I know it. Firstly, let's go over a theory that I've been seeing that I wanted to stop in its tracks. I mean, it's probably not gonna happen, because this video is probably gonna get like 6,000 views max. But either way, the identity of this little girl is 100% not Susie, the girl who goes on to possess Chica. Susie has been dead for a long time once the game takes place, being dead for over 50 years or so. So there is literally no possible way that this girl could be Susie. You may be thinking that she could be possessed by Susie, but we released her spirit in the Happiest Day minigame, and she has only possessed Chica as far as we've known. Some assume that the Happiest Day minigame takes place at the end of the timeline, however I don't think that's true. Considering how FNAF 3 was supposed to be the end, and that when FNAF 3 is over we get the good ending, to me that indicates that the Happiest Day minigame takes place in FNAF 3, especially considering how the simulated pizzeria FNAF 6 does not have to lure the original animatronics back to the pizzeria, meaning that they did not need to be released because, well, they had already been dealt with. So about this girl, let's go over some evidence about what we see on the poster. Firstly, there is her blonde hair. We know that it's blonde thanks to the rim lighting on the character being blonde at her hair, and while yes it may seem stupid, I think that the general consensus is that this girl is blonde. While rim lighting is the color of the light that it is instead of the color of the person, it also isn't going to be yellow on a darker surface, so this means that her hair is not black, eliminating Cassidy from the race. So this is not the spirit that was possessing Golden Freddy, or who a good amount of people consider the one you should not have killed, aka the Vengeful Spirit from Ultimate Custom Night. The girl in the middle is also wearing a jacket and what appears to be a denim skirt, fingerless gloves, white socks, and sneakers that light up Skechers style. Hashtag not sponsored, but like Skechers, hit me up, we can probably work something out. Now this may not be out of the ordinary to any of you, but this instantly reminded me of someone from a previous game. As I did mention this in another video, Elizabeth Afton. Okay, I get that she's been dead for longer than Susie, but just hear me out, okay? See, when we were playing Sister Location, we ended up getting the cutscene where Elizabeth is grabbed and killed by Baby, turning Baby's eye color from blue to green. This outfit that this mysterious girl is wearing is nearly identical to the one that Elizabeth was wearing in that minigame, aside from the light up shoes that wouldn't be available for another decade by real world standards. However, in FNAF in 1983, they also had discs that emitted sounds that altered the appearance of things in your brain. So a couple of light up shoes 10 years early doesn't really seem like that much of a stretch. The skirt is also identical to the skirt that Elizabeth wears in that cutscene, and the jacket could easily be covering up a similar styled shirt, which could be pushing the idea that Gregory having two stripes on his shirt is definitely important. But I want to talk about the color. You see, there is no real color on this girl. Bumping up the saturation, brightness, or vibrance actually shows that this girl is drawn in black and white. Have you ever heard of the saying, lack of evidence is sometimes itself evidence? Like maybe you're dealing with a professional killer, or that these thieves are overly cautious. Well, I think that this is a similar situation. Think about it. Why would they draw this girl in black and white? I mean, yeah, sure, she's backlit, but being backlit doesn't make you grayscale. This is an indication that the color of this girl's clothing can possibly mean something. Maybe Scott thought that he was too subtle with Gregory, only putting two stripes on his shirt, so this time he went for the full outfit including color. Speaking of color, there's also the matter of her shoes, the only part of her that isn't rimlit that has color. The color of her lights being purple and red. Purple obviously being a nod to William Afton, aka the Purple Guy, a character so synonymous with purple that I can't wear my favorite shirt on this channel now without being called a serial killer. And red, while misleading, actually does tie back to Elizabeth Afton in the form of Baby. Her entire outfit was red, including her bright red hair, and I mean, like, it seems fairly reasonable to assume that this girl has at least a connection to the Afton family, although there is another explanation for the red on her shoes. Give me a minute. Given that the other two humans on this screen, Vanny and Gregory, are also connected to the Aftons, we can guess that this is the case with the blonde girl as well. However, I don't think that the girl herself is Elizabeth. Here's the wow moment, alright? I think that this girl is possessed by Elizabeth. Yeah, I know, right? Hear me out. I know I said that that's not possible with Susie, but that's because we freed her, alright? There are 7 faces on the Blob, the secret antagonist of Security Breach. 4 of them have lit red eyes, and 2 of them don't. The 4 that do are Naked Endo, FNAF 1 Bonnie, FNAF 1 Chica, and Mangle, all of which are somehow present in some form or another in the Pizzaplex. Mangle is Roxy, Bonnie was Bonnie, Chica was Chica, and we fight multiple endos on multiple occasions. The two that aren't present, however, don't have their eyes lit up, Baby and the puppet. But we know that fire doesn't do anything to Remnant, clearly. I mean, Afton has burned, what, 3 times now, and none have stuck? And in another video, we determined that the spirits can only be freed when they get their unfinished business resolved, like the missing children in Happiest Day. Baby also doesn't seem too happy about burning in FNAF 6. She in fact says that she wants to make her daddy proud, and dying to fire would really do the opposite considering how many he's survived. So, much like we suspect Michael could have, Elizabeth could have swapped bodies as well, into one of the missing children that Vanny took. Hell, that could have been why Vanny took them in the first place. Afton wanted his daughter to have a vessel, hence why this one looks so much like Elizabeth's original body. This also explains why there is red on her shoes, because it's meant to represent the glowing red eyes that would be in the animatronic head. Remember, it's damn hard to kill an Afton for good, and in the books, Baby is really the one orchestrating everything, at least when it comes to the Afton amalgamation. Especially since this girl is facing away, her eyes could also be green, and I have a feeling that throughout the game we will see her eyes either flip-flop or start off blue and become green or something like that. Or, what I think would be the coolest way to do this would be having her eyes green normally, like if we see it in like a camera or something, but be blue in a mirror. So, here's how I think the story went. After the FNAF 6 fire, William gets a hold of Vanny in order to get his body back. He creates, through the company, a new location on top of the old one to hide his deeds, and then he sets himself free. In the process, though, he notices that his daughter's spirit is also stuck. Since this is the first time they've been together since he put her in the basement of sister location, he decides to help her out, and causes Vanny to start abducting kids who look like his in an effort to rebuild his former family. Given that his youngest son is either still possessing him or now loose to the elements as well, the blonde girl is then kidnapped and Elizabeth finds her suitable host, so she's possessed. And now she follows Vanessa around in an effort to keep an eye on her and remind her that Afton is always watching. She starts manipulating her through encoded chats and messages, and hacks the FNAF AR animatronics to cause them to malfunction, and gets Vanessa promoted to security guard to keep an even closer eye on her. As a part of her observations, she starts therapy just like Vanessa does, and despite her telling the truth about her family history, it doesn't line up with the girl that she's possessed. Hence the one therapist calling out Client 46 for it, and her explanation about what happened to her family seeming to lack emotion, since after all she watched it happen as Baby instead of experiencing it as an actual child. After the collapse, she is either brought back by Afton requesting help with himself, or possibly also to help secure the vessel for Crying Child, who escaped along with a Michael possessed Glamrock Freddy. To me, this seems like a game about reuniting with lost brothers, lost hope, but most of all, reuniting a family. The Afton family. After all, we have all the characters now. The misguided father whose misdeeds cost him everything, his loyal daughter who wants to see her family back, the mother who now agrees and is a part of the father's plan, even if unwillingly so, and the sons, one too scared to do anything, and the older brother who helps him beat the circle that their father created, who rights their wrongs and makes up for their family's sins. What do you think? I feel like I'm pretty spot on with this one, and that this could be a great launching point for the next part of the series, but let me know what you think down below. Last time I came to the conclusion that this mysterious girl is one of this round's missing children that got possessed by Elizabeth, and while I do still firmly believe that, this got me thinking, who else could it possibly be? We asked you loyal subscribers on a community post, and the overwhelming conclusion was that the majority of you are wrong. Okay, just kidding. A lot of you though seem to think that this could be Vanessa as a ghost, and despite the fact that Vanny's eyes are on the poster, I think that you might actually be onto something, so let's talk about it. Although I just need to put this out there, the identity of this little girl is 100% not Susie, the girl who possesses Chica, okay? Susie has been dead for a very long time when this game takes place, being dead over 50 years or so, and while that doesn't really matter in the context of FNAF, there's still no way it could be. You may be thinking that she could be possessed by Susie, but we released Susie's spirit in the Happiest Day minigame. Some assume that this takes place at the end of the timeline, however I don't think that's true, considering how FNAF 3 was supposed to be the end, and that's when FNAF 3 is over and we get the good ending. So to me, that indicates that the Happiest Day minigame takes place around the time of FNAF 3, especially considering how the simulated pizzeria from FNAF 6 didn't have to lure the original animatronics back to the pizzeria, meaning that they did not need to be released, because they had already been dealt with. So in regards to this theory, the first thing I need to disprove is that it's impossible, since Vanny's eyes are in the corner. But just because we see some faded eyes, it doesn't mean that a spirit cannot be separate from a body. I mean, look at Afton, for example. This man was code that possessed a human while his body was stuck in an underground pizzeria. So there is a precedent for their body being around without their soul. The issue in my mind comes around when we see that since Vanny's eyes are glowing, her body is operational, which kinda shoots this theory between the eyes until you remember that there are multiple things possessing Vanny's body. One version of Glitchtrap's code and then Vanessa herself. So we can go one of two ways with this now. The fact that Vanny's body may solely be Glitchtrap now, or the fact that Glitchtrap is still operating in Vanessa, but Burntrap is also Afton. He's back as Afton, okay? Either way, there are two versions of Afton in operation right now. One of them is coded and the other is possibly not, but we can't really be sure. And William isn't the only person to have a coded version. I mean, remember Princess Quest? The game designed to keep Vanessa at bay while William wreaks havoc as Vanny? I mean, the Princess Quest ending, otherwise known as the best ending, is the only ending to have 3 stars. It had some significance, but what? It's a question we've been asking ever since Security Breach ended. Another one is what happened to the Princess Quest game machines located around the Pizzaplex. It seems reasonable that at the very least the one in Roxy's salon was destroyed, and if the Pizzaplex is in ruins, then the others must have been destroyed too, right? Well, if that is the case, what happens to Vanessa's spirit? Like, is it released, or does it fade away into nothing? It's not fading away, not with unfinished business still afoot. The spirit of Vanessa had to go somewhere, but where could it go? Well, this could be some random girl that Vanessa just grabbed off the street or that was walking by, or it could still be one of the missing children that was trapped in the building. Either way, whoever they are, it's really of little consequence if this is really Vanessa possessing them. Okay, the only thing that matters in this context is that Vanessa's possessing them, not who the kid is, I'm guessing. The precedent is set in this universe where one person can possess multiple things if one version that is possessing something is coded and the other is a spirit. So this is definitely possible. The character on the poster is also actually completely grayscale, aside from the rim lighting thanks to her flashlight and the color of her lights on the shoes that she's wearing. These are also colored purple and red, colors that in this game specifically are linked to William because it's purple. I mean, I can't even wear a shirt on this channel now without being called the purple guy. So yeah, purple equals Afton, Burntrap, William, whatever. And then Vanny with her giant glowing red eyes are also on this poster, okay? It's like they wanted us to make this connection. But if they wanted us to make the connection, does that mean that this is all intentional, or is it mostly just a red herring or MacGuffin to keep us away from the real story? That's for you to debate in the comments. Either way, I think that the possibility of this girl being possessed by Vanessa is absolutely possible, especially since she could be just a manifestation of the player character from Princess Quest, just kind of modernized because, you know, it's FNAF, we can't really argue with that kind of thing. Which I'm sure would make a lot of people mad if that is the case, because everyone thinks that the girl from Princess Quest is Cassidy or Golden Freddy, but that's not canon because that name was scrapped from the files, okay? Someone at Steelwool may just have not known the significance of that name and like named the character after their daughter or something, or after a sister or whatever, okay? So no way to be sure, but that name has been confirmed as not canon, so what do you think, okay? I mean, the majority of you did think that it was Vanessa in the community post, but what do you think after watching both of these videos? Okay, be sure you let me know down below, and if you haven't seen the other one, okay, the link will be at the end of this video for you, because that's just the kind of generous, beautiful, exotic, absolutely befuddling human being that I am, I'm also very humble. I'm still banking on the Elizabeth train, but it really depends for where they want to go with the series next. Like, they could go Invasion of the Body Snatchers and get Vanessa to claim her body back, or they could go with a family reunited.
Now first, your instinct may be that this is impossible, okay? And honestly, that was my first instinct too. I mean, Susie's been dead since like 1985 with the missing children's incident, and she ends up possessing Chica, who is then set free and happy as a day. So like, how is it even remotely possible? Well, some say that the happiest day minigame that sets Susie free really takes place at the very end of the timeline, no matter when that ends up being, meaning that at the time of security breach, none of the original 5 animatronics have actually been released, which means that if we go off the fact that this girl is possessed, this is entirely possible. I mean, Susie is the first of the missing children and definitely seemingly the most important one, given the fact that we see her as a kid in the Fruity Maze minigame's reflection, and I mean, even if the one you should not have killed is Cassidy, it's just a blown out version of her face. But the puppet is present for the happiest day minigame, and they get released in FNAF 6, right? There's one key detail, however, that really makes me unsure. Something that's been in the back of my brain for a while, but it may make a few people mad because it involves using the novels. In the original novel trilogy, starting with the Silver Eyes, the Funtime animatronics are injected with Remnant made from the original 5 possessed animatronics, meaning that if Remnant does indeed contain part of the soul instead of just being metal that once had a soul, the original 5, despite being set free in happiest day, no matter when it takes place, could still have the slightest bit of spirit form in the main world, I guess. Which could also explain why Molten Freddy had to show up along with Scrap Baby, also known as Elizabeth, in FNAF 6, unless we just assume that there was a slight bit of Elizabeth remaining inentered after she left, or if we assume that Henry wanted to get rid of all traces of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, or all things that Afton created, which at that point also included his son. That's a lot of assumptions. So without assuming anything, but also while using the books to get some further context, which some people don't like, it is possible that after they burned in FNAF 6, much like Afton, Susie's spirit was set loose. Not free, like it didn't move on, but it was just loose in the atmosphere, willing to grab onto whatever it could. Or that it merged into the blob, and then the fire that Gregory causes that caused the cave-in ended up setting her soul loose again, and then she possessed a person. I don't think that there is really any explanation that could mean that this is Susie's original body. That seems fundamentally impossible. So whoever this is, if she is a character we've already met prior to this game, she would have to be possessed. Unless this is an entirely new character, which is absolutely possible. I mean, it doesn't have to be someone that's already established, obviously, but I mean, it's fun to speculate and theorize nonetheless. Another indication that I've seen a few people point out is that Chica does actually also appear on this poster, which is certainly an interesting choice. I mean, she was certainly the most, popular enemy animatronic in this game, and the other animatronics are very out of commission even before the collapse. I mean, Roxy couldn't see, and Monty was split in two. But since we can't really take anything in FNAF at first glance, is this actually meant to indicate the identity of our mystery girl? It's certainly a possibility. I mean, the only ones who really know are Steelwool, Scott, and whoever made the poster. But given Chica's state, I'm guessing that this is just meant to indicate a timeline, that this occurs after the collapse rather than at some other time prior to the game starting, and then maybe they rebuild the Pizzaplex, or maybe even long after it ends. Because I mean, look at her, okay? Chica has got to be probably one of the most resilient animatronics in the group, because she's still kicking despite being crushed by a trash compactor and then having a building land on top of her, and she still has most of her smoking hot bod. Some of it was removed, some of it was cracked, but her face also has seemingly melted, possibly due to the fire we were using to kill Burntrap, or maybe it's just because a fire started in the kitchen when the building collapsed, and then she thought that it was just really hot pizza. I don't know. She's also lost the lower half of her left arm, her left, not your left. Remember that, I've made that mistake. And she's also lost her right leg warmer.
The casing on her midriff and right arm is gone, but other than that, she is still fairly intact. Her endoskeleton is, at the very least, especially compared to Monty. Also, interestingly enough, only Chica's white face melted, meaning that it looks like someone spilled frosting all over her face. Yeah, I guess that takes the term busted to a whole new level. But other than that, there aren't really any connections between her and Susie. Probably the most resilient animatronic in the group because, again, she's still kicking. Susie was possessing the yellow Chica, so I feel like this Chica being white is meant to show us that this is not going to be like the same sort of situation. So I don't think that relating this Chica to that Chica or this Chica to Susie is really logical in this case. I think it's a bad idea. Okay, no, I guarantee you that this is not going to be Susie, and if it is, I'm going to quit FNAF. Look. Yes, she's blonde, and yes, Susie was blonde, but she was also blonde in 1985, okay? It's been like 50 years since the missing children's incident in the games, and the original Chica animatronic was destroyed, and Susie's spirit was released, okay? Happiest Day does not take place at the end of the timeline. The pigtails on this girl are very reminiscent of Baby, but this girl has blonde hair, and while we may not be able to see her face, I feel like it is possible that she does have green eyes, okay? Because anyone with blonde hair instantly makes me think of Elizabeth Afton, not Susie. Since Elizabeth has more impact to the story than Susie, and even in the books, Baby ends up having more of an impact thanks to the Afton amalgam. And considering the blob that got introduced in this game is very much similar to that amalgam, this still makes the most sense to me, okay? But I figured that I'd go through the possibilities in separate videos just for good measure, okay? I'm not sure. Who do you think this little girl is, alright? Do you think it's Elizabeth's spirit? Do you think it's Vanessa's spirit? Do you think it's Susie's spirit? Or just some random stupid kid who wandered into a house of horror? Be sure you let me know down below. I'm still adamant on Elizabeth, but I don't know, maybe it's just a stupid kid. And honestly, you know what, if it's a stupid kid, they deserve it.